we are just starting the YouTube live.
Sure.
Give me just a moment, sir.
Yeah.
In fact, I became the member, when I attended the YI Innovation and Entrepreneurship Summit in 2015.
Very nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you meet that time by any chance?
No, we did not.
Mm-hmm.
We just happened to meet this year, 2022.
Mm-hmm.
We are late. I think I should have met you before. Yeah.
I remember and Dr. Kaushik and a few others in one of their offices. Forgot the
correct. Koromangala.
Koromangala. Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did a workshop.
Great design thinking workshop, and that was done for YI itself, Arun and everybody else. And it was a fascinating experience what we had discovering and understanding YI first and foremost, discovering new pathways for us. And it was an amazing session. And that was our first detailed exposure to design thinking at an overall level. So it was wonderful.
That time, I think we had around 10 or 12 members coming in, right? In the meeting.
True. Yeah. The core team members, we got all of them to be part of it.
Yeah. I remember we had some pizza in the afternoon.
Yes.
In the office there.
Yeah.
I saw some of your posts in the LinkedIn. Interesting work.
Yeah.
You're all doing very creative work.
Thank you.
Now this event is organized for the complete YI, is it, or is only for the Bangalore chapter?
No, it's for entire YI national.
Okay.
So should we start formally?
Yes, Ritesh, you can go ahead with the event.
Okay. So good evening and welcome everyone. I would like to introduce myself first. I'm Ritesh Sood from Lucknow YI and currently National Co-Chair for Innovation. So Young Indians is an integral part of CII and has a presence across 57 cities in India with over 4,000 direct members. We are excited to share that YI has partnered with WCIW, that is World Creativity and Innovation Week, as the preferred youth organization to foster innovation in India. World Creativity and Innovation Week is a global celebration and a worldwide community dedicated to encourage and celebrate all forms of creativity and innovation present in more than 130 countries. We would like to welcome Laik and Bhavin from WCIW. So we at YI are celebrating World Innovation and Creativity Week from 15th of April to 21st of April by organizing remarkable sessions with some of the best speakers in the field of innovation, design, and strategy. We want to encourage every global citizen to challenge the status quo, explore new ideas, be leaders themselves, and take the steps towards making the world better through critical thinking. So we are kicking off this series of events with an expert in the field of innovation, Mr. Lakshman. We welcome Mr. Lakshman. He is an independent consultant with 35 plus years of experience. He advises companies in the area of strategy, innovation, design, and technology, enabling them to plan, adopt, and scale design-led innovation initiatives. Earlier, as a senior management professional, he played leadership roles spanning 22 years plus at SAP. Prior to SAP, Lakshman held leadership roles at IBM Global Services and Digital Equipment Corporation, NIT, and Trans Projects. He is also an adjunct professor at IIM Bangalore and Udaipur, and earlier with the School of Design Thinking, Hasso-Plattner Institute, Potsdam, Germany. Would like to call upon Chintan Shah from the team to take the session forward. Chintan, over to you.
Thank you, Ritesh. So we'll start with the session by Professor Lakshman. And then later on, once his session is over, we'll open up the floor for Q&A. Professor Lakshman, we can start with the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me share my screen. Is this visible for you? Is the screen?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. And my special thanks to Ritesh and Chintan, and also the earlier YI and now CI members to get me into this wonderful innovation week session. And very pleased to be here and being associated with your organization. So also a privilege too. This particular topic about fostering a design-led innovation culture is one of my favorite topics as well. It is easy to talk about generally about innovation culture because there are so many subtopics around that, and it's been talked about by many people generally about innovation culture over many years. I took up specifically the design-led innovation culture, which is slightly unique. There are many similarities with the general innovation culture, but design-led innovation culture has got its own specificity. And similarly, there are some overlapping topics as well. Therefore, let me begin with this design-led innovation culture, how to foster it. Before I deep dive into the culture itself, I'd like to provide you some interesting statistics that will be a forerunner or a preamble to this culture session. Some years back, not some years, just a few years back, Forbes magazine, you must have heard about Forbes, they have run a study about how does innovation, one second, on the innovation topic and the innovation culture. So they did a kind of a survey amongst some of their companies across the globally. And this was a question posed to the CEOs of these companies. Why is everyone talking about innovation? This is one of the important questions they put forth to them. And the response was this. 77% of CEOs find it important to specifically include innovation in their business strategy. So innovation is an integral part of the business strategy for most of the CEOs. They believe that without innovation, you can't sustain and grow to become whatever you want to be, to become a market leader or a follower, or want to follow your whatever your market share or your market leadership goals that you have set for yourself as a company. Right? So therefore, this becomes an integral part and an important part of their overall business strategy. Now, the next important question is that, what does this have to do with the culture? The result is still more interesting and a bit amazing as well. 62% of the respondents felt that culture is a top one hurdle to digital transformation. When I say digital transformation, it also means innovation, because companies are transforming to themselves to become digital. We're all into the digital world already now, and there are no limits now to see where we're going to reach up to this echelon of the digital transformation. Right. So therefore, the culture becomes a very, very important aspect. And when we talk about culture, this is a very loosely used word, culture. Right. Most of us, whenever we get into any kind of a conversation, particularly organizational conversation, or even non-organizational context, culture is being very randomly used, very loosely used, but also given in a lighter connotation. But culture is a very, very powerful, not only a word, but also an important, what can you say? It's kind of a being, the state of beingness. So without that, that is the nerve center, that is the feeling, that's the emotion that runs the company. When I say a company, I'm just using the word company here, which could be similar to, could be a profit organization, not profit organization, a small organization, or a medium-sized organization, or it will be a large organization. And just use a word called company, it applies to any such kind of an entity. And therefore, all those being loosely used, the power of culture is very important to take the company to whatever levels that the company aspire to become. So we talk about it as we go along. And let us see what one of the professors, Deborah, from MIT, what she has talked about the culture and the leadership. So how do the company leaders view culture? So leadership often underestimates the importance of culture. Underestimate, mind this, underestimate the importance of culture because they think, okay, that is what it is, right? And yet, culture is one of the most important sources of competitiveness, right? We undermine this culture. We talk about what is the product, what could be, depending on your nature of your company. Could be a product company, a service company, or it could be a solution company, or it could be all together. And still, culture is very much downplayed. But if you look at it, most of us, I know that in the YI group, most of you are all entrepreneurs, but some of you have had some, before becoming an entrepreneur, you have worked with some companies earlier, and the word of culture must have occurred during some conversation, right? And why is that you like being in that company? Why is that, what challenged you most in that company? And what was interesting in that company? And why is that you left that company? What was so toxic in that company? And I'm sure the answers for most of these questions could be like the culture, right? So what is then that culture is all about? Before we come to our own version of culture, let's look at what Wikipedia talks about it. Okay. So culture is an umbrella term which encompasses the social behavior, institutions, and norms found in human societies, as well as the knowledge, beliefs, arts, laws, customs, capabilities, and habits of individuals in these groups. To make it a little simpler, it is basically the social behavior, the customs, the rituals, and the habits and the beliefs that we have. To take up some of the key words from this Wikipedia definition, right? So basically, the social behavior, how we behave ourselves, and how do you follow some behavioral pattern, and that becomes over a period of time a ritual, kind of an exercise, without which things don't function. You may call it some process, but process is a well-defined set of activities. But when we talk about culture, it is beyond the process. There's a human element coming in the culture here, right? Which is very different from the process here, right? All of us have in our companies, we run business processes or what you call functions or departments, whatever. But you know that now most of the companies have become process oriented. But then these are all again activities based, function based, and people are running that. But what is topping up on all these functions or the processes is the human behavior, the human mind that make or break these processes to work, isn't it? So therefore, therefore the culture aspects coming in here. Supposing you're a new company, like most of you are, some of you could be small companies, some of you could be a mid-sized company, some of you could be large companies. But over a period of time, your leadership style or the team style, working style, their behavior, their working norms, their beliefs, right, and their value systems come into picture, and that sets a kind of a pattern that people who join later start following them, right? So therefore, that's how the culture starts building in, and that becomes, after a few years, you can see that becoming stronger and stronger if it's a good culture, right? So given that, let's move on to what is, let me just jump to this design-led innovation, design thinking. I want to bring this topic here and then connect the culture aspect into the design thinking. When I talk about design-led innovation and design thinking, I'm using them in interchangeable terms. And to me, both are the same. And design-led innovation is a broader term, and design thinking is a very commonly used nomenclature when it comes to human-centric innovation. So therefore, just look at what is design-led innovation or design thinking is about, just a simple definition. And I'm not going to talk about design thinking because that is not the purpose of today's presentation. I assume that many of you would have been exposed or at least been aware of what is design thinking, right? Because if I get into design thinking, even if I want to do an intro, I require at least an hour to talk about it. So therefore, I'm going to talk about the cultural aspect of the design thinking and therefore what it is, how it is going to be part of the innovation. So therefore, you'll have to forgive me for not going into design thinking in detail. And I just give a simple definition of design thinking. And maybe if you want to, if you have some questions, we can keep it in the Q&A session about some aspects of design thinking. So with that, this is a simple definition of a design thinking. Because it's a human-centered approach to solving complex problems and innovation, leading to innovation, to be more precise. It combines three essential components of innovation, which is technical feasibility, economic viability, and human desirability. Right? So you can see the bold ones in blue. These are very clearly mentioned about human centricity. So human desirability, which means that we are looking at a human-centered approach to look at what is the desirable aspects for the human being or the users. We call them as users, or you can use the word customers as well. But there's a difference between a user and a customer from the design thinking perspective. So therefore, let's for a current session, let's keep it as a user here. The users are actually the people who are consuming a product or a solution or a service. It may not be a customer. A simple example is for the baby food. Okay, the customer is the mother and the consumer is the baby, like that. So that's the analogy here. So therefore, here the user is the person who actually experiences your solution or a product or a service. The customer could be the company who will procure the service from you as a service provider or product or solution provider, right? So therefore, in that aspect, where is the human desirability embedded? If the human desirability is captured, then what happens is that you come out with, when I say before coming out with, you are able to look at the problem from the human centric point of view, then you will be able to address the emotional and the feeling aspect of the user who is being currently attached or not attached to your product or service. So you will be able to see what the emotion that is running with the user, and you are able to see whether you could address the problem of that emotion by applying empathy, right? And then come with the relevant solution. If you don't get into that emotional level, I would say this. We have these factors called sociological factors, psychological factors, functional and technological factors. Most of the issues that the users go through will touch any of these factors or in a combination of these factors. Okay, so therefore these factors affect the user personally, like in these four areas. Therefore, if you're able to come to that level of understanding by applying empathy, then your problems get resolved. Your problem gets defined very clearly. Else, your problem will remain at a level where it will be like any other problem. It will be very difficult for you to get across. When I say that a problem will remain at that level, because there are different types of problems. Design thinking is wonderful when you talk about wicked problems. When I say wicked means they're really complex, which means these kind of multiple stakeholders having their own emotional connections, their own perspectives, their own psychological inhibitions, whatever, right? So therefore, the problems are, we call them as wicked problems. And design thinking is very, very appropriate to solve those kinds of problems. However, if a problem is very simple, very logical, you don't need design thinking for that. Most of us, I'm sure that at least That's been my exposure. That in any kind of a working crowd, whether it's a working crowd or entrepreneur crowd, most of them are engineers or they're coming from a commerce background, and little percentages are coming from the science background, right? So therefore, it is easy to use our left brain and solve very business problems. There are some number related problems. Yes, we can do that. Some logistics, we can solve them, right? But then the same logistics becomes a complex when it comes some geographical factors come into picture, cultural factors come into picture, right? And then what happens is then it becomes difficult to apply the left brain thinking solutions. Therefore, what happens is design thinking becomes very, very relevant, because that is the way the process works, right? The process is simple, at the same time it's a structured chaos, I would say. But you follow that, you trust the process, you can see the magic happening, right? So therefore, this is the approach for design thinking is different, and some of you have been exposed to this will be able to relate to what I am saying. And therefore, what happens is that your mindset also have to change, particularly the people who are practicing design thinking. It is a journey. It is not just you're doing in a workshop or you're doing a project and it is over and you become a design thinking practitioner. No, it doesn't happen like that. It is like any other. It is like you're setting up your company, right? And then reaching your first goal, second goal, whatever. The first year you want to make whatever, maybe your 5% ROI, and the second year you want to do some 15% ROI. It is something very similar, that through innovation, you want to do some, you want to increase your revenues by 2%, or maybe the following year you want to increase by 8%, right? If you keep such goals, then what happens is then it becomes a regular practice for you, right? And then when it becomes a practice, then your culture aspects start kicking in, right? So let's see then, before that, some bit of content about what is result-led innovation, how it has made news globally, and India is not an exception from that. So you can see some of this short blurbs here, okay? Harvard Business Review article, and then various other things. I'll talk to you a little bit about this slide. It's an interesting slide. Why? Because there's a bit of before design thinking or design-led innovation become very popular. At least I started my accidental journey into design thinking about 12 years back, and it changed my perspective. It changed the career itself. Till then, I was like you. I was running business. I was numbers oriented, and running after customers, doing the business development, delivering solutions, right, and then doing whatever is possible to make things happen. But this was an accidental discovery for me, and then afterwards, it was a complete different journey for me. And now, let me go to what I actually wanted to speak about in this particular slide. Is that you must have heard about this company called Ideo, particularly in any of the entrepreneurs who are into branding and communication and product design, any such design areas will know clearly what is Ideo or who is Ideo is all about. Ideo is an industrial design consulting firm based out of Palo Alto in US and in the Valley, and they've been very famous design company for many years, and they themselves have transformed as a design thinking consulting company. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because David Kelly, the guy we can see in the bottom right corner, the Business Week, you can see the guy who is sitting in the sofa. He is David Kelly, the founder of Ideo, right? So they had got a funding from one of the co-founders of SAP. His name is Hasso Plattner, and Hasso Plattner was very enticed, very excited with what these guys are doing, and therefore, what happened is he funded a School of Design Thinking in the Stanford University. And that's how the School of Design Thinking came into existence about around 15, 17 years back. And that set the ball rolling. And Ideo and David Kelly being a Stanford graduate himself, and therefore it was easy for him to, as a Stanford alum, he was able to start the school there, and it became a very big success, particularly for the student community, and therefore little later with the companies as well. And Hasso Platter himself, being one of the co-founders of SAP, he tried very hard to bring that into SAP, but it was very, very difficult. SAP being a very large company, and he being a co-founder and a supervisory chairman, it took some years for him to get this into SAP as well. But however, what happened is that in the period of time, lots of things started happening, right? And initially, people have been very, very diffident about this word called design thinking. There's so much of abuse. There was so much of mockery about this, about the word design thinking. Many people felt it's just about post-it exercise. People come have fun and go away. All kinds of things. But then, if you go through the process, if you trust the system, you trust the process, and you get the mindset, then you start believing that things will happen. So anyway, so over a period of time, things have started changing, and you can see the business magazines, the management journals started recognizing what is design thinking, and Harvard Business Review, we can see evolution of design thinking come into picture, and the Wired talking about it, New York Times talking about it, and KPCB, John Meada, you can see the bottom left design in tech report. It's a wonderful report to that. I'm going to show you the next slide what the report says, and one of the slides. And most important is the big consulting firms who were doing the management consulting, the business consulting, and raking money with the large companies. They had no other choice to embrace design thinking as part of the practice, because design thinking started getting into the board of several companies, whether it's a small company or a large company. Today, you can see that design thinking or innovation, for that matter, is an important topic on the table in the board. And therefore, the large consulting companies, anybody can think about today, they have design thinking practice. They may call it differently. They may use the word digital under that. They may do digital transformation, and they have their own coinage of the term of design thinking. Therefore, but what they do is completely about design thinking or the design-led innovation. So that's a bit of a background to what we are talking about design thinking. So it took some years. See, although this term design thinking has not popped in the last 12 years, but this has been there for several years. And the design thinking draws the content, the methods, the approach is coming from various design disciplines, which has been existing for several years, more than 50, 70 years, right? But then this has become very contemporary. Thanks to Ideo, I must say that they were able to package it nicely, and they're able to market it very well, and it has now been consumed by companies in that format that they could digest it, right? So now this is the Design Management Institute study, whom I talked about earlier. The John Meada is one of the wonderful designers. This guy in the bottom left, John Meada, designers. Very interesting person, and he is the one guy who turned around the Rhode Island School of Design, which became the top design institute in US today, who turned it around completely and made it happen. So that is his genius. So as part of his DM, he was part of the Design Management Institute. This is kind of like your YI institution. DMI is another institution, and being part of that, they ran a study, and this is what happened. This statistic is a bit dated, But however, most of the companies listed on the right side, most of them, they still remain true for this kind of numbers. What it says is that most of this design-led firms outperform the Standard & Poor index by 228%. That is a whopping percentage of growth, isn't it? So you can see the alphabetical listing of the companies which are given here, and you think about it, and you see you love them, right? Apple products. Who will not say that they don't love Apple products, right? And you look at anything, P&G, Rubbermaid. I think if you're US or in Europe, you know rubber. You can appreciate Rubbermaid very well. Or if you're enterprise, if you're using SAP, and then you know what SAP is all about. And if you're traveling abroad, even in India, we have Starwood Preferred Hotels, the chain of hotels. So you know what it is. Steelcase, of course, a very famous furniture company. Steelcase owns a bit of Ideo as well. And Target, you must be aware of the large malls they have it in US and so on. Of course, Walt Disney and Whirlpool. Some of them very, very popular too, and Nike, of course, right? So these are people who have imbibed design thinking into their own company for a period of time. Now comes what is the culture aspect coming? Now that they've been using for many years, we are sure that there is something good happening out there. So therefore, what happened is that while I was with SAP prior to leaving SAP, that is 1 year before the pandemic, we started, being part of the core team of the SAP Innovation Group. We started a group called Design & Business Community. This is a Design & Business Community is meant for companies who are practicing design thinking or design for their business, not for only the products, but solving their business issues or any kind of a business ecosystem related issues or anything futuristic for the business, right? So we started that, and we had a good number of members, close to 500 plus members overall. And this just about a representative sample of companies. We also had in India, and I started that sometime around 2017 or so. And we got around 20 companies in India at that point of time. I'm not sure what is the status today, because after 2019 and then the pandemic, everything went to cold storage. But what is interesting is that these member companies, there's a lot of cross learning that was happening, a lot of learning and sharing. Every quarter we used to meet, and there is quite a lot of enriching the takeaways for each of the participating member in these sessions. So therefore, what we did is I ran a study with some of these members, basically to test the lecture as the culture aspect. So what are the essentials of this culture? When I say essentials here, means the components or the topics that are relevant in the design thinking culture or the design-led innovation culture, right? So we ran a study, and the outcomes are interesting. And it's not a rocket science, but what is important is that how these companies are following them steadfastly, right? And making it as a kind of a habit. Okay, so let's see what are these. I am classifying them into 5 areas because this is a real study, and this has not been published. And I have done it in a few public forums, but not been published. So these are the 5 topics. The first one is perform like a band. That's how the companies work together. Sticky process, which people can easily remember and recall. And kindergarten in a garage, we can come to that in a few minutes. And habit forming rituals, okay, and spread the fire. Okay, so let's go one by one. How much time I have? I have another I may take a little longer, so I hope it's okay. Maybe 20 minutes. I was given 45 minutes, so I'm slightly.
It's fine, sir.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So let's go through this. I'm going to bring in some real life cases here for some of them at least, because each of the cases will take a long time to discuss, but I'll try to keep it short. Maybe I'll reserve them for the Q&A. So I will try to speed it up. So perform like a band. Again, perform like a band is a topic which has got subtopics. One of the subtopics is, so how do you orchestrate for your company? I know that the culture is, you build the culture and they perform in harmony and in unison, so that you grow in, you progress towards a common goal in a harmonious manner. Right. One of the aspects is the leadership. Okay. So here we are talking about PepsiCo and the CEO Indira Nooyi. So all of us know who is Indira Nooyi. So she is a Indian-born, Chennai-born lady, and who made it a lifetime big with PepsiCo as a CEO, right? So this is an interesting story. And prior to 2015, she was a CEO for 9 years with PepsiCo, and prior to 2015, few years before, they were running through very tough times. They had the top performing products were losing their market share, and there were so much of issues with the company, business issues with the company, and she made some bold decisions to bring the health-related products from Pepsi, and so that they become very value and ethical conscious for their customers and their consumers, and they live up to, so that they can live up to the expectations, so that also to be a company that people could trust upon. It's not just the sugary, colorful liquid, but more than that is a healthy ones. So she was transforming the organization, and she went through a very tough time. That was the point of time one of the activists in US called Nelson Peltz wants to break the company because of the company's performance, want to split up. But then she took some bold decisions and then was able to turn it around with their new products, and she got the full confidence from the board. So post that, she had some bigger ambition for the company, how to keep the progress very well, keep that momentum, and accelerating their innovation as much as possible. Then she realized about that innovation can happen with design thinking, and therefore she brought in a person called Mauro Porcini from 3M, an Italian designer who's been with 3M for a long time. 3M as a company is a very innovative company, right? So you can see a lot of innovations that we are using them in our daily life without knowing it's a 3M clone or so, right? So many, one simple thing that you can think about is a post-it notes, right? So we use them in many in a stationery today, right? So anyway, so Mauro Porcini was hired, and he was on the board of the, when I say board, is the senior management team. And she believed in design thinking, and she gave him the full freedom to work out how they can get the innovation across to the across PepsiCo, so that they get some useful innovations for the market. So therefore, she herself was involved in every important activity of design thinking journey. Although the Mauro Porcini was driving it, she was instrumental that she was driving the company. She was saying that any large project, be it a business project or a functional project or a new venture, whatever, it has to have the design element coming in there. When I say design element, the human centricity, the empathy angle coming to it, and without which you can't go further. And any of the business cases, without the design element, it is given back to them to rework and come back. And she visited every week to any of the malls and tried to see herself as a customer, like not like a CEO. She walks like a mother into the aisles of the malls and then see whether any of the Pepsi products are talking to her or not. So if it's not talking to her, there is something wrong, isn't it? Either they are cluttered, they are not organized properly, or they are not inviting the customers to pick it up. So she went back and said, this is what we got to do. We need to provide that experience wherein the customer will like our products, will consume our products. So therefore, right from the conception of the product itself and to its productizing and then to commercializing and then post-market support, the whole cycle, the whole chain has to be human-centric. And she insisted upon and she got people involved, and Mauro was able to do that. He took some low-hanging fruits with the friendly setups within the company, made them successful, and then got other functions and groups on board. And today, you know how PepsiCo turned its full color, it glorious color. And sometime in 2014, 9% of the revenues are coming from the new innovations that they were able to do after getting Mauro Porcini and the design thinking involved. So leadership matters a lot, and there are several such stories. I can talk about Hassab Natna, who drove that a few years later with SAP. If you heard about SAP HANA, the product, now it is available on cloud as well, which is the famous, the big, not only a breadwinner, but the cream as well for SAP today. So that is again coming from design thinking long back. You can think about Apple. They may not talk about design thinking or design per se, but Steve Jobs and his designer called Jonathan Ives, until about a few years back, Jonathan Ives was there. He also left the company, I think 2 years, 3 years back. And they were, for him, for Steve, design is first, engineering is later. So if the engineering can't do it, what design says, then they have no option. They have to do it. So that was a kind of the persistence and perseverance that these people are able to drive. They think about simplicity, think about the customer, think about the user, think about what the experience the person will go through, and therefore your user will go through and see whether you're able to understand that emotion and make a product that will delight them. So therefore, dealership makes a very, very important role in performing the band. The next important thing, okay, so this is another interesting quote from Indira Nooyi. There's a fine line between innovation and design. Ideally, design leads to innovation and innovation demands design. That's a beautiful quote, isn't it? Now, skills is the next one, which is very simple. Most of the companies who are practicing, because it's coming out of study, they have done what I'm saying now in partially or fully, and it has rewarded them quite well. So one is that they were able to identify their people who are getting into the innovation projects. It is not the same set of people who do the same innovation projects. They keep rotating the people to get, because what happens is the problem could come from any area of work within your company. So therefore, the people in that area of work will also be involved in the project, plus a few other team members coming from other cross functions. So therefore, what happens is that each project you can see the team members changing to some extent. So therefore, over a period of time, you have quite a number of people, and then you start something like this, that you start with an awareness, and you start doing the small projects, and you start doing some decent projects, and then you do some real projects, and then see whether this innovation you're able to complete it and able to get a success out of it, right? But at the same time, we should also be mindful that this process, although it's like a magic, it's an innovation. Therefore, all innovation going the process need not be successful. We never talk about our failures. We always talk about our successes. All companies go through failures, but they never talk about it, isn't it? So therefore, we should be cognizant about this this aspect. That is true with any system, any kind of an approach you take. It's not only design thinking, for anything that matter. Things can always go wrong in any of the aspects. Whatever the cultural aspects I'm talking about it, things can go wrong in any, like say for example, leadership, something happens, change of leadership, the whole thing can go for a toss, right? So there could be some skills deficiency, then the whole thing can go for a toss. And a few other things we are going to go through here. So therefore, how to perpetuate it, how to make this experience, I mean, this kind of what do you call this practice perpetual is through the culture. So let's come back to some aspects of the culture here. So skills is, you have different skill levels that you need to impart to your people, starting from a novice to a beginner, to a practitioner, to an expert, right? So people have designed, companies have designed a different set of curricula for this kind of people who fall into these categories. So this is how they progress. So there's a lot of content available. There's a lot of experience that is required to reach that level. And it is not easy. Half a day I do a design thinking workshop, I can't become an expert, right? So they start becoming, it's like, you're watching a cricket match and you become, at home you sit and then with the friends and we become experts commenting about, how Dhoni must have cracked that six, right? So those kinds of things will happen, but that is what we need to avoid. Similarly, people will go through different formats. It could be online or it could be in person, different kind of projects. When I say that projects means it could be small to medium to really complex. I'm talking about complexity, nature of complexity. So it can become it can be in such variations, and it also could be in terms of the period. It could be a 2-week project, it could be a 3-month project, it could be a 6-month project, depending on the size and the intensity. So that's how the skills will matter a lot. So therefore, it is an investment, but it pays good dividends, and particularly a long-term player. Long-term player, because most of us think, we want instant gratification, particularly the millennials, and I'm sure many of you are millennials in this audience here, and then the Z generation. So there is instant gratification we want. So take the example of startups today, right? We want to do it really fast and then see how quickly we can get a valuation and exit. It doesn't work, and it doesn't work like that. And then you can see that it is a purely a valuation game, and then we see who have been the winners, who have been the losers, but it doesn't take anybody anywhere, right? So any startup has to be a marathon, and you can look at any big companies today. They have been the startups many years back, right? They had that long term in focus, and then they built their business over a period of time. And they say business means the people and markets and trustful customers and partners and so on. So therefore, skills plays a very important role in performing a band. Rewards and recognition, very simple things takes you for a long way, right? So if your teams are involved in innovation, and if there is a person in a team who is trying to do experiments, trying to do some experiments, he may fail, it's fine, or she may fail, it's okay. But then he's risking and then making the experiments and trying to prove something. So you reward them, right? That's what these companies do. Good, bad, or ugly, but you made a try solving the problem. So that shows that you are interested and you're involved in the company's matters and the company's customers matters, right? So that's some kind of a reward that you could do. Also, if there is a member in a team who is able to identify your customer's problem, able to talk to the customer, empathize with them, and identify the right problem, and then able to solve the problem and give some innovative solutions. And you can give them a heroine or hero kind of a title, right? And give some recognition for that person, right? That becomes a motivation for them, but at the same time, also a motivation for the rest of the company who would see what they have done, and they will start identifying in their own areas how they can improve upon things, right? And similarly, and you can also give them a good environment. That's part of your rewards and recognition. So they may want to have some flexible workspaces or some flexible working style, right? These are all part of your rewards and recognition. That's what we call as perform like a band. Now, coming to the sticky process, very simple. Keep the process very simple so that it's anybody, if you wake up a person in his night sleep, the person should be able to recall very, very easily, right? So these are just about a few steps. So this is a 5-step process of Ideo: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. 3 steps from SAP and 4 steps from IBM here. Very simple. Whichever process you follow, the process content is similar when you talk anything. The content embedded in any of the steps here, whether it's a 3-step or a 5-step. Okay, the sub-steps are very much the same. The methods and tools are very much similar. It's up to you to pick and choose the right tools and methods, right? But then how you encapsulate them to make it sticky to the teams that are involved is very important. So that you put some 20 steps or whatever, like you look at any other process improvement processes, right? You have seen the process improvement methods. They're pretty long. There are multiple steps. It's difficult for people to remember. And it's not that people don't do it, but they do it. And then it really worked for old timers, because that time they had no choice, because now the generation is very, very different. But with the current generation, you can't make it longer and too much into detail. You have to make it easy and sticky. So this helps really a lot. Kindergarten in a garage, your workspace. Imagine that you can see the left side and the right side, right? If we are able to put them together, and you are creating a very creative workspace there, right? So what it means is that you walk into the space and your mind will start working. You can't say, you will know only when you go there. You can experience it. Any of you, if you are going, say a motorbike garage, of course you can't, in the car garage, car service stations, they don't allow you. But imagine you're taking your scooter or a motorbike to your roadside motorbike mechanic shop, right? So if you're having a friendly conversation, what happens there? You know that you're not going to stop with just a conversation. You're going to pick up something, some tools from there, from the friendly mechanic, right? And then start doing something with that, right? Similarly, you go to a crash, that's what you do. Even though you're not allowed, you feel like you want to fiddle with something with the children toys. I'm sure that many of you, when you bought the Lego bricks for your children, right? The first customer for the Lego bricks is you, not your children, right? That's how you get enticed, right? That's how it sparks the creativity in people. So how do you create that kind of an environment? So many companies have invested like this, a lot of companies in India as well. And this is a simple, this is a SAP app house in Heidelberg. And this is also there in SAP labs in Bangalore, but it's different. But the concepts are very similar, and implementation is different, right? You can see them. The informal lounge, the seating lounge is there, and you can see on the outside on the glasses. You can see informal meetings, and then you can see it straight in the center. You can see the formal workshops meetings are happening, right? And then you can see the large whiteboards and high work tables with high bar stools, right? This enables you to, because you can stand and work, and because when you sit when your feet is aching, but when you stand, your creative juices start flowing very, very quickly. So these are the things. Plus, what happens is open spaces where you can bump into anybody. You need not be your team. You can be other team member, or it could be another project team member, or it could be a customer, or it could be a partner. It could be anybody else, right? So what happens is you walk in or bump into somebody, they pick up a conversation, and serendipity happens. That sparks you a lot of good ideas. It could be anybody for that, or it could be a child, or it could be a visiting student. a school student or could be a college student, and they could be curious to know something. They could pick up a conversation with you, and the serendipity happens, right? So you need to create that kind of a space and environment for that, and collaborative workspaces, right? So that your brainstorm not on the table but on the board, and you can see a lot of interaction that is happening because these stickies can be pulled out, or thrown out, or change places, whatever it can. Right? These are your. This could happen during the problem finding session, or it could be from your ideation session, or it could be any of those phases of your design thinking process, right? And creative work elements. There are a lot of things like makerspace. Makerspace is very common in many of the companies today, and the most popular currently is 3D prototyping element sitting in many of the companies today. Apart from that, you can also see a lot of these creative children things that are available for you to do some prototypes for you to prove whether the solutions could work or not. So this kind of an ambience you need to create, which is what we call as a kindergarten in a garage. Now coming to the next important factor, or the essential factor, is habit forming rituals, which is very important part of your building the culture. So one of the key things is failing early and failing often. Okay, so at least in the Indian context, we have been trained, we have been groomed in such a way that failing means it's a taboo, isn't it? But in the design thinking parlance, failing early and failing often is encouraged. Why? Because you are experimenting. Failing early and failing often is it's another term for experimenting. Through every experiment, you are learning something, so that you don't repeat that failure, but you're learning something new. You might be wondering why I have put this Dyson vacuum cleaner, right? This is a famous Dyson vacuum cleaner. I'm sure that some of you must be the customers who have this Dyson vacuum cleaner, and you must have seen the difference between the traditional vacuum cleaners and the Dyson vacuum cleaners. I am 200% sure that you will be betting on the Dyson one, come what may. No, I'm sure about it. Now, why I'm saying this, because James Dyson is a British product designer, and he believed in experimentation. One aspect of as a designer, he follows the design principles, which is again design thinking borrows a lot of, as I said earlier, the design principles and methods from the design disciplines, and democratize it for everybody to use it. So therefore, he being a designer, he learned from the users, he learned from the analogous situations, from other industries and so on. So he was having his own vacuum cleaner. He realized that there is a filter in that vacuum cleaner, right? You start using them, it creates so much of noise, and the vacuum cleaner does a suction. Or at some point of time, the filter doesn't work. Why? Because the dust gets collected, and the suction is also lost because it's not able to do the suction because of the filter getting getting clogged with the dust, and therefore the noise also gets more and more. So actually, the conventional vacuum cleaners, we think it is cleaning, but actually it is not, unless you are emptying the dust collector very often, and then the filter importantly, which means it's a kind of a repetitive action of boredom. For that, if you want to clean one area, you will have to do this maintenance work multiple times. But James Dyson, that is the problem that he wanted to solve, and he got this inspiration from the timber mill. In the timber mill, particularly in these developed countries, there's so much of sawdust that happens because so much of wood cutting happens there. But to your surprise, you see there is not so much of sawdust that is settling down in any of the timber mill itself. You saw that cyclone collector, which is there in one corner of the mill, a powerful one, which sucks up all the sawdust and collects them and put it in collecting back somewhere else, right? So he got that inspiration, and that's what he started using that concept. He started bringing the cyclone collector aspect here and started experimenting so many times. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised the number of times he did the prototyping and experimenting and iteration. You'll be surprised. He was very much biased for action, which means not too much of the thinking, but doing most of the times. So this is what he did: 5,126 prototypes, and his bias is towards action. Say, unless you prove this is not ready for the market. So that is important to fail early and fail often. Particularly in design thinking, what happens is that when you do fail early and fail often, you don't spend too much time, you don't spend too much effort, you don't spend too much money. So therefore, what happens is that, what it means is that you start with prototypes which are like this, low fidelity prototypes, like this one, low fidelity we call them, which doesn't cost you anything, right? You have some paper, you have some sketch pens, you have some paper cups, right? You have some building blocks, right? Some playthings from the children. That's all you're doing. It doesn't cost you more than 2,000 rupees, whatever, right? So what happens is you do that early prototypes, you do it so very quickly and test it out. Again, you make the changes based on the feedback. Again, you iterate it, that you can do it multiple times. And you spend very less time, and therefore the effort and therefore the time. Once it gets acceptance to a large extent, then you start getting into, we call them a high fidelity prototypes. Then you get into, if you're a software product, then you get into your backlog items in your agile development, run sprints, and then get your software product. But this is true even for automotive. This is true for mechanical engineering. So automotive, you can talk about body in white. You must have heard about this concept of body in white, right? So they try to do that before getting all the functions and features. They do the body in white and test it out as much as possible, right? But then what is important is that in such companies, the investments of prototypes are very, very high. But in design thinking, you don't do your investments comes much, much later. Once it is proven that it's getting accepted at whichever market that you want to look at, right? That's why fail early and fail often. Cherished multidisciplinary teamwork. Yes. Oh,
just to cut you short, can we wrap up in next 5 minutes?
Yes, I will try to do that. Okay.
Thank you,
Sorry.
sir. Thank you.
I have completely lost time factor really. Okay.
No.
Let me move it very quickly, and now I have to stop the thing. What it means is that Tata launched a very important, very interesting watch. This is analog watch, important for the mining workers in the Tata Steel mining and foundry. And this is a multidisciplinary teamwork. Basically, Tata Steel, Titan, Tata Elxsi, Tata Communication, and TCS got together, brought in the multidisciplinary aspects into work, and try to solve. The people are falling because of mine workers. They get into different occupational hazards. Right? There are gases, toxic gases coming in that can make them fall, make them faint, whatever. So therefore, they're looking at the safety of the people and the workers, and they came with some wondrous analogous watch which could detect the heartbeat, detect the temperature, detect the movement, detect the fault detection, and then as well as the ambient gases that is surrounding that area. With that, they could send an alarm to the worker or to the supervisor so that the person could be evacuated from any kind of accident. This multidisciplinary teamwork, which design thinking aspect is important for building the culture. Another important one is Philips. There are many examples. I'll give only one example here. Is that acting? What do you call it? Thinking locally and acting globally. Is that there's a Philips in China that they had wanted to build in the soya maker from US. Then they realized that this is not going to be the case because the soya milk, what they got from the product which they wanted to launch was filtered. But the Chinese consumers, they wanted a non-filtered soya because if they do filtered, they're losing the essential nutrients from the soya. So therefore, they have to change based on the customer preferences here, or the user behavior and user preferences, and they completely modified it, got the global resources, and started offering this as a product which was very successful in China. But this concept made a big success. The concept became a big success for France. They made a soup maker based out of this concept. Of course, they had to modify for the local needs, but the concept is the non-filtration. That concept helped them. That's what they call them as insights here. That's what similarly that happened with automatic noodle maker, become a very good hit in the spaghetti for the Italian market. Similarly, if the rice cooking one will become a big hit in the Russian market for the brosh, a porridge kind of a thing for the Russian market. So that is basically embracing diversity, the local diversity. When I say diversity, it comes in two forms. One is within the team who are working on the project. Other is a market diversity we are talking about just now, right? So this is what the one is a CEO of the Philips China talking about, basically about local needs and the global resources for realization. Ambiguity. This is a very interesting topic. The last topic in the culture aspect here. I'll just take very short. See, this is actually it's a big topic, but I'll try to keep it very, very short. I want to take the pandemic situation here. And during the pandemic situation, all of us, including the national health authorities, ICMR, and the health and regulatory authorities, the governments, state governments, central government, everybody were all concerned about how to contain the pandemic, how to get the new vaccine out, right? That was the goal, which is good, which is important, because vaccine, we have no other choice other than to get a vaccine to get the immunity. That is definitely needed. But at the same time, what was happening is that we lost many of your dear friends and relatives. Lakhs and lakhs of them, we lost them. And they became a mere statistics, right? And looking back at what we've gone through the last 2 years, had we thought about how to prevent death, right? We never thought about it, isn't it? There are, I mean, it is after contacting the virus, then we're trying to see how we could cure the virus, cure the person. Instead, can we prevent them? Is there a possibility? You'll be surprised that there are many medical institutions or hospitals and senior doctors across the country who came with several ideas with ICMR, and there are so many of them, right? And then they were in an ambiguous situations. Okay, they were in a very ambiguous situation, the ICMR, because there were several proposals running into hundreds coming from different hospitals and doctors, and they're not too sure, number one. Number two, they have to deal with day-to-day problems. At the same time, they are also responsible to give an answer to the government, and at the same time, try to see how much they protect the public, right? Imagine that they had accepted this ambiguity and went along and discussed in a kind of a quorum, okay, with these proposals. I'm sure they must have got something very, very interesting that could have prevented a lot of this fatality. I'm giving this because I was attending one event in Chennai some time back, and this is done by the new director from IIT Madras, and they ran one research with the pharmacologists and the doctors and with the patients in the hospital. They tied up with all them, and then they ran, and it is funded by Chris Gopalakrishnan. He's also an alumni of IIT Madras. And it's a good research, it's a published research. And they found that there is one simple medicine Within 3 days of contacting, you get that symptoms. Within 3 days of the symptoms, if you take it, in the second day itself, the symptoms go away, and then no, your virus is completely taken away. And all these 200 patients that they have tried with, all of them survived. At the same time, they went to the government, they went to the authorities, they pleaded, please consider, because it doesn't cost you a dime. It's another 40 rupees for one strip. And you are giving so many things to the public. Why don't it just distribute this freely to people, public, so that whenever they have a symptom, they just have to swallow it, right? But what I'm trying to say here is that this ambiguity in design thinking, this is a norm. You accept the ambiguity and deal with it. We in companies, we are afraid of dealing with ambiguity because there are multiple perspectives coming in, and we always looking for homogeneous perspectives, which is the biggest mistake we make in our regular businesses, whether it's a people-related issue or another issue. So therefore, accepting ambiguity makes a very important mark as part of a culture in the design thinking aspect here. So this is the last one, seeking inspiration from users. I'm not going to the story, it's a beautiful story, but I'm not going to do that. Google, when started in the beginning with imagine yourself about 10, 12 years back without the Google map, how we had gone through from a location A to B, and how Google was then at that point of time. So it was like this, you can't make a head or tail out of this, right? And we are people in India that we are driven by visual clues and the landmarks and so on. So Google did that in US, and it worked in US, but in India they didn't work, and India became a hotbed for doing the research here, for the design research, design thinking research, and Bangalore paved the way to come out with some wonderful solutions for the Google map. Now that it is working fully well, but it solves many of your problems today. So now they came out with they worked with the people who are going through that experience. So seeking inspiration from users, from the user experience, they got inspiration, and then they got the visual clues and landmarks inbuilt in the solutions, and it became a very big hit, right? So therefore, this is part of the culture. Finally, spread the fire, and how do you get it across the company? One is to get designers, get the experts talking to your company about how other companies did it in their company, or in a social aspect. Open design, like we basically open up the design thinking courses on demand basis. For the people who is interested, they can do it, or who are interested and enroll for themselves. Celebrate failures, very important. Reward them because they made an attempt. You motivate them. Coach them. Coach them as well, because most of the time they're hitting a shortfall, either in terms of methods or in terms of skills or in reaching out to the people. Either could be a customer or a partner or somebody. There may be some hurdles. Coach them. Build a community of practice so that the community can work by themselves, right? There are people in there and they can help each other, right? And then reach out to academia and sponsor your people and get them trained in proper courses. Not this half-day, one-day test, but proper courses where they get a proper immersive experiences. And then participate in the Excel communities. You can see so many communities happening all over India when there are around design thinking and design. Don't hesitate to join them as a novice. You will learn so much from them. Similarly, run some programs for non-designers. It worked very well for many companies. So with that, most of you, wherever you belong to, big or small or large companies, are you ready now to begin this cultural journey? That is my last slide. And I know this is going to be a big change. And this is an interesting word, term I would phrase like to put it here. Change is never painful, resistance is. Thank you for listening. And one good news I want to convey to you before I close is this. So today I was reading a LinkedIn posting. Very good news for schools is this. Look at the underlined one. India becomes the first country to offer design thinking and innovation subject from 6th standard in CBSE schools. That's a very good progress that we in India is making, so that I also read the message coming from Chintan, right? So saying that the next generation will not have this issue that we are facing, the human centricity issue that we're facing. Surely we can be hopeful that new products and solution services are coming from the new generation will be much more empathetic in nature and relevant in nature. Thank you for listening. And if you have the time, you can do a few minutes and then you can close. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a few questions. I'll just quickly
Okay.
ask them to go ahead. Bhavin, you have a question?
Yes, yes, Mr. Lakshmanan. It's actually a privilege. I've been a practitioner for design thinking for 5-7 years, as in 7 years. I started with IBM. So my question to you is on the pitfalls of design in terms of implementing innovation culture, right, or a design thinking culture. Now, there are two examples you personally would have seen. IBM struggling with growth. You've seen SAP. SAP is doing extremely well. Now, what are some of the pitfalls when we're going to implement, the design thinking culture? Because the success, everybody talks about it. Would like to understand the pitfalls.
Okay. I know,
and especially from a individual, and we have the audience who are going to listen to us. Many of them are MSMEs as well. So just keeping that in mind, some context and thoughts from you will be helpful.
Yeah, this is my personal view. People may shoot me for this, but I don't mind talking about this in a public forum like this. Now I know the IBM design. I've been to your Austin Design Center as well, one of the best design centers, 50,000 square feet. Phil Gilbert, who turned around the situation for IBM from the Lou Gessner's era to the Jimmy Multi, right? So, and then to now it's Krishna coming in now. So I think you did a very good job when you're talking about. I like the way that IBM started with and grew with, and the kind of culture they're building there. And they also opened up different design centers all over the world, including Bangalore. I know about it. I think the pitfall, what I see here is that they had opened it for their customers. Design thinking, any new solution that is going from IBM, the account managers have to qualify their account to take them to the design thinking route, so that you solve a particular problem and then take them to the solution, and then you start identifying what the solutions that you have from your IBM portfolio, and then you implement it for them. That is the way that I've taken. I slightly differ from this because it's not only IBM, it's also with SAP, it's also with many other companies, including the consulting companies. What they do is they do a quick and dirty projects with these companies. It's just very, very high level. You do a 1 day or 2 day kind of a projects, and you get to know your problem at a high level, and you think you know the real problem that you're trying to solve. You don't get into the human centricity point of view, the emotion point of view, the empathy point of view. Although you pretend to say you are practicing empathy, I'm sorry to use the word pretend here, right? You're not able to get to the root of the issues there. So what happens here is that it becomes like you are generating a pipeline, right, for your solutions that you can sell it to your company, your customers. I think this is one of the biggest pitfalls for any kind of a service company. In the other way, if you do it the other way, take it as a proper consulting, you are doing a proper project. You should not hesitate to say, yes, this is going to take 3 months time. This is going to take 6 months time. And you have to invest in it. If you're going to have a 200 million product coming out of it, you'd rather invest that, whatever that 2 million or 3 million, because you're going to get some 200 million revenue out of it. And you may get around 20% EBITDA out of that, right? People don't look at that way. So I think this is one of the biggest pitfalls that is happening. It's expected.
Yeah.
Even they were riding on the horse of Phil, that he will bring the big change. He did bring in, but he could not sustain.
Sure, sir. So I see as a practitioner, and I'm just asking this question as a follow-up. There's a lot of hype that is around design thinking today, and it's important that corporates or small companies don't get into the hype. This was, like I mentioned in the chat, this was a masterclass on how we can, integrate innovation and culture. So thank you for that. I think mine is more from a forward-looking perspective, because there is a little amount of shallowness when people want to implement design thinking. There's a lot of anthropology that is involved, which is getting missed out as a part of the design-led culture. And how do you see, any tips on anthropology for people, or at least behavior science, to keep it as a simple sentence, as a behavioral science, because that is also picking up. A lot of authors are writing about it.
Correct.
So how do you suggest that we people take a look at design-led culture with the behavioral science aspect? Any one or two tips before, because I know, we're already running late, and sorry, I'm just Chintan, I'm pushing in two questions, but I thought it will help people. Yeah.
No, you're spot on, and it's a very, very relevant question. Actually, what you said about the behavioral science aspect, it is covering the diversity. Because of want of time, I could not talk about it. Very, very important aspect you brought in the Q&A. Thanks for asking this question. And it is necessary, and that is integral part of any design thinking exercise. And whether you do it yourself, or whether you bring in the behavioral scientists in your team, that is a way to go about it. We did that at least in SAP. I can talk that we brought in the domain people into the context there, and we brought in the behavioral people as and when it's required. Not that we could afford them as a full-time, because we don't know what to do with them full-time. But some of the companies today, actually I had this is a second question on the same topic. Another person asked me in the LinkedIn sometime in the morning today. You must have heard about this company called Fractal Analytics. It's a US-based company. They are based out of India as well. They merge data science and behavioral science together, and without which they don't give solutions. Period. They don't. I mean, the chief design officer is very clear that you hired me for some purpose, and I have to provide the value for the customers. And allow me to do that. It may delay you by a month or whatever is the time, 10 days or a month or whatever, but we want to get the insights. If you don't get the insights, your analytics is of no use, right? You may have some wonderful numbers churning out of that, and whatever the insights you get from the numbers can remain only in that level. But if you can't tie up both, you can't connect them both, we are not there yet. It is already happening, and people are realizing that. And whoever have heavily invested, like big companies are investing in them. Anthropology is a very, very necessary component of design thinking. If I answered your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I'll let Chintan do. Yeah, I did ping him personally. So thank you, Chintan, for the opportunity.
Great, sir. Thank you very much for the wonderful session. It was really quite informative. We learned a couple of things about how top companies of the world brought in innovation as a culture to grow far beyond their competition, and the stages of design-led innovation, which will help us in making our organizations go to the next level. So on behalf of all the YI members, I thank you very much, Professor Lakshman, to give this wonderful session on fostering a design-led innovation culture. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chintan, for organizing and getting me on board. And
Sure.
It's a pleasure talking to you all. And
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, sir.
And I
Thanks
hope to
for-
see everyone tomorrow also. We have a session tomorrow as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, YI and WCIW.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Can you stop the live recording, live streaming?
It has stopped, I think.
नहीं, live streaming अभी भी चालू है.